So just some chit chat about fitting the Meanwell PSU into the 96L LTO car. As you know, there's not that much room left, so what I want to do is remove the old DC to DC and fit the Meanwell in the place where the DC to DC was. So this is the full DC to DC I took out. Now I did actually have a dead DC to DC, so I was looking at how the Meanwell would fit, and it won't quite go in the hole left by the old DC to DC. You'd have to cut a piece out, but also you don't really want this in here because this is not a dry environment necessarily in here, because the air's coming off the road, wet spray, whatever, coming through here and then out and venting back through the floor. So you don't really want the electronics in here. You want to separate the electronics from this area. So what I did was I took apart the old DC to DC converter I had to recover the heatsink base. So this is the obvious thing to use. This is great. So this is the full standard OEM DC to DC base, and of course that's made for that hole there. Bolts on beautifully, and the Meanwell PSU has 4 mounting holes on the back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer those marks onto this plate, and then this will just bolt to that from the inside. I'll obviously fit this to this and then bolt the plate back down into the assembly there, as you can see. So it'll be this orientation. The DC to DC plug will reach the input, high voltage input, and the normal 12 volt output wires will reach here, and you can also get access to the voltage adjusting screw on the Meanwell. This will give the Meanwell some really super cooling, because I'm going to use some heatsink paste underneath here when I'm screwing these two together, so that there's good transfer between the base of this and this massive aluminium heatsink there. So you really shouldn't have any problems there, because this is going to be cooled by the IPU fan as normal. So the IPU fan will obviously just sit on the end here, and that doesn't really interfere with any of these connections etc on the end here, and you can still get to it all. My concern was that this is slightly taller, and that the clearance between this and the switchboard would be compromised. Now it does fit, and there is still at least a couple of centimetres clearance, so I'm happy with this, because this is all going to be bolted securely together. There isn't going to be lateral movement. And what you could do if you were paranoid is you could glue a sheet of plastic to the top of this, so that if it did come off, which it shouldn't do, and it fell against the switchboard, then it's not going to short out anything. So I'm probably not going to bother, because as I say, there's probably nearly an inch of clearance here between this and the switchboard. So I'm not going to bother with that. So that's where we are with the Meanwell. I've investigated the suppressor snubber unit, and I'm going to have to take one off this switchboard here. So I've got a switchboard here. You can see this snubber unit I was talking about earlier, which is probably causing the high voltage short circuit. Either the negative or the positive side is leaking to the chassis via this earth lead. So what I'm probably going to do is I'll take this off, have a look at it, just analyse it a bit more, maybe try and disassemble it, unpot it, and I may well make my own with some brand new capacitors, and see if that cures the problem there. So that's where we are. So at the moment it's the Meanwell power supply mounting and getting the IPU back in, and then it'll be the snubber unit on the battery switchboard, and then we should be ready for some more testing. So the Meanwell obviously can operate pretty high voltages, so that shouldn't really have any problem with the voltage range which we're going to be using for the car. So you can see, so obviously I wouldn't advise taking apart a working DC to DC, but they are beautifully made. All these lovely components here. I don't know which one had failed on this particular one, but I've obviously got lots of spares now, and I've also got a useful spare harness here, because I will have to fake the temperature input into the MCM from the DC to DC, just to say that it's actually normal. Otherwise the MCM will try and throw a code. Or I could have it slightly warmer so that it runs the IPU fan, but anyway, might just use a pot across the temperature sensing wires in that. But that's a useful connector to have, because that will obviously plug straight into the OEM harness on the AMA harness. So that's where we are, utilising an old DC to DC to provide the base plate, bolting the Meanwell onto the base plate. There's still sufficient clearance between that and the switchboard. Maybe putting a piece of plastic just for total peace of mind, but it's not really necessary. These all connect up just in the same way. It all should just all bolt back in, and that probably weighs about the same. This Meanwell unit probably weighs about the same as the parts that we've taken out. So that's a good little solution, I think.